Nationwide, now the argument is made, well, all Americans had guns, all white Americans anyway had guns, and that was a fine thing. Again, back to this book by Professor Carl T. Bogus, The Hidden History of the Second Amendment. In reality, few Americans owned guns, he writes. They did the frontier areas of New England and western Pennsylvania, the years 1765 to 1790, they did a detailed search of the records of what people owned, what they left to their heirs and things. And this went down to things like broken teacups, list of personal property. And what they found was that 14% of the household inventories included firearms, and 53% of those guns were listed as not working. In addition, few Americans hunted. Bellensales writes, quote, "From the time of the earliest colonial settlements, frontier families relied on Indians or professional hunters for wild game, and the colonial assemblies regulated all forms of hunting." So it's not like this country was birthed in everybody owning a gun. It was fairly rare, except in the South, where the white militia was used to terrorize African-American slaves. Patrick Henry and George Mason were the leaders of the Anti-Federalist movement. Patrick Henry of Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death fame was a big supporter of slavery, ironically. And he gave a speech at the Constitutional Convention in which he was very, very concerned that Article 1, Section 8, the powers given to the federal government, could be used to subvert the slave system. And that the way that this would happen, and what he was seeing was exactly, by the way, what Abraham Lincoln did, was that the federal government, under the powers given them in Article 1, Section 8, if there was a war, they could call slaves out of the South into military service and free them, and thus bring about the end of slavery in the South. In fact, here is his actual speech. He said, and this was, in the debate about whether or not, again, Virginia should sign up for the Constitution. Quote, "In this state, there are 236,000 blacks, and there are many in several other states, but there are few or none in the northern states. Under its power to provide for the general defense, Congress might enlist blacks into the army and then emancipate them. Slavery is detested in the North. They will search that paper," that being the Constitution, "and see if they have the power of manumission," that is, freeing the slaves. "And have they not, sir? Have they not power to provide for the general defense and welfare? May they not think that these call for the abolition of slavery? May they not pronounce all slaves free? And will they not be warranted by that power? This is no ambiguous implication or logical deduction. The paper, the Constitution, speaks to the point. They have the power." It would be the federal government if we ratify the Constitution. "They have the power in clear, unequivocal terms and will clearly and certainly exercise it." He went on to say, "A decided majority of states have not the ties of sympathy and fellow feeling for those whose interests would be affected." In other words, most of the states didn't, they weren't all that hot about the slavery in the South. He says, "The majority of Congress is to the North and the slaves are to the South." End of quote from Patrick Henry. About why, what he was saying is, if we're going to ratify this Constitution, we have to amend it to say that the militias in the South that ride the circuit, that they're basically like neighborhood watches, and they're armed, that their right to carry weapons will not be taken away. Now, James Madison responded to Patrick Henry. 20 minutes after Henry gave that speech, James Madison stood up and said, "I was struck with surprise when I heard him express himself alarmed with respect to the emancipation of slaves. There is no power to warrant it in that paper, in the Constitution. If there be, I know it not." End of quote from James Madison. But that being the case, Madison had proposed a Second Amendment which said That the people have a right to keep and bear arms, that a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state, that standing armies in times of peace are dangerous to liberty and therefore ought to be avoided as far as the circumstances and protection of the community will admit, and that in all cases the military should be under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. That no standing army or regular troops shall be raised or kept up in time of peace without the consent of 2/3 of the member present of both houses. That each state respectively shall have the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining its own militia. That the militia shall not be subject to martial law except in time of war. Then he modified that to say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, a well-armed and well-regulated militia being necessary for the best security of a free country. This was the ultimate first draft of the Second Amendment. But no person religiously scrupulous of bearing arms shall be compelled to render military service. Madison then changed that in response to Patrick Henry to change it from being the best security of a free country to the best defense of a free state. Now, why was he saying the best defense of a free state? Because the states in the South defended themselves by, again, let me make this very, very clear. What the militia did in the South, 1755, 1757, for example, Georgia carefully divided militia districts into discrete patrol areas. They required patrols under the direction of commissioned state militia officers to examine every plantation each month and authorize them to search all Negro houses for offensive weapons and ammunition and apprehend and give 20 lashes to any slave found outside plantation grounds. The militia were the ones who enforced slavery in the South. And to defend that right to have slavery in a free state, not a free country, a free state, the Second Amendment was put into place. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
So try running that by your favorite gun nut. And by the way, I think that we're seeing the same thing. It's all about, all this Chicago crime. Well, come on, this is code for black.